I never thought the person who would try to take everything from me would be the one I spent 30 years raising. I was 68 years old, and I had built a good life. A quiet life, but a full one. My name is Dorothy Harmon, and I had lived in my house on Clover Ridge Lane in Asheville, North Carolina, for 31 years. I knew every creak in the floorboards, every corner of the backyard garden where my roses came back every spring without fail. My husband Gerald had planted the first rosebush the year we moved in. He passed away 6 years ago, and I kept that garden going because it felt like keeping a piece of him alive. After Gerald died, I did what a lot of women my age do. I adjusted. I learned to eat dinner alone, without it feeling like punishment. I learned to sleep in a bed that was too big. I learned to be proud of my own company. I had my book club every other Thursday. My neighbor Pauline, who brought me tomatoes from her garden every August. And my daughter, who called me every Sunday without fail. Or at least, she used to. My daughter's name is Renee. She's 41, lives about 2 hours away in Charlotte with her husband Craig. For most of Renee's adult life, we were close. Not the kind of close where you tell each other everything, but the kind where you show up. She was there when Gerald got sick. She sat with me in the hospital during the long nights. I held her hand at the funeral. I thought we understood each other. I owned my home outright. Gerald and I had paid it off 15 years before he died, and after he passed, the house became mine, free and clear. It was worth somewhere around $340,000, which in Asheville meant more than it might sound. I also had Gerald's life insurance, which I kept in a savings account and tried not to touch. I had my pension from 30 years of teaching 4th grade, and I had my Social Security. I wasn't rich, but I was stable. I was comfortable. I was proud of that. I want you to understand that before everything else. I was not a burden. I was not confused. I was not struggling. I was a 68-year-old woman who drove herself to appointments, grew her own herbs, and had read more books in the past year than most people read in a decade. The first sign came in January. Renee started calling more often, which should have felt like a gift. But the calls had a different quality to them. She started asking questions she had never asked before. What was I doing about the gutters? Had I had the furnace inspected? What would happen if I fell and no one was there? I answered her calmly each time. The gutters were fine. The furnace had been serviced in October. And if I fell, I had a phone in my pocket like any sensible person. But the questions kept coming, and they started to have a shape to them, a direction. They were all pointing somewhere, and it took me until February to see where. Renee came to visit on a Saturday in late February, which was not unusual. What was unusual was that Craig came with her. Craig almost never came to Asheville. He was a quiet man who I had never fully warmed to, not because he was unkind, but because he was the sort of person who made you feel like you were being assessed. He looked at my house the way a contractor looks at a property, not admiring it, measuring it. We had lunch, and it was pleasant enough on the surface. Afterward, when I was clearing the dishes, Renee sat down at the kitchen table and said she wanted to talk to me about something. Craig sat beside her. That was when I felt it. The way you feel a change in the air before a storm. She told me she had been worried about me living alone. She said she and Craig had been talking, and they thought it might be time for me to consider other options. She said it gently, the way you say something you have rehearsed. She mentioned a retirement community about 40 minutes outside Charlotte. She said it had beautiful grounds, social activities, medical support on site. She made it sound like a vacation. I asked her directly, what would happen to my house? She said they would sell it. She said the money would go toward the retirement community and give me a cushion for the rest of my needs. She said it like it was already decided. I did not get angry. I smiled and said I would think about it. That was the first decision I made that day, and it was the right one. I had learned a long time ago that anger shows your hand. So I smiled and I thought about it very carefully for the next 3 weeks. What I was thinking about while I smiled was that I did not want to move. I did not need to move. And something about the way Craig had nodded along while Renee talked, and the way he had looked at the kitchen window like he was already calculating what new owners might put in its place, made something cold settle in my chest. I called my friend Pauline that evening. Pauline is 72 and sharper than a tack, and she had gone through something similar with her own son 2 years before. She listened to everything I told her, and then she said, very quietly, "Dorothy, before you do anything else, you need to talk to a lawyer." I made an appointment with an estate attorney named Patricia Walsh the following week. I drove myself. I did not tell Renee. Patricia was in her 50s, calm and no nonsense, and she asked me very direct questions. Did I have a will? Yes, updated 2 years ago, leaving the house and my assets to Renee as sole beneficiary. Did I have a power of attorney in place? Yes, also Renee. Patricia paused at that. She asked me whether I fully understood what that meant. I told her I thought I did. She explained it to me again, more carefully. She told me that with a durable power of attorney in place, Renee had broad authority to act on my behalf. She told me to think carefully about whether that was something I was comfortable with, given what I had just described. I went home, and I sat in Gerald's chair by the window, and I looked at the rose bushes, and I thought for a long time. The calls from Renee continued through March. Each time she brought up the retirement community, she added something new. She had toured it. She had put my name on a waiting list. She said the waiting list was long, and I should not delay. She said property values in Asheville were high right now, which was a good time to sell. She said she wanted to make sure I was taken care of. She always said that last part. I want to make sure you're taken care of, Mom. I noticed she never asked what I wanted. In April, she drove up alone to bring me a folder. Inside was a packet of documents. She said they were just preliminary paperwork for the retirement community, an application, some financial disclosures, a few forms that would let her help coordinate the sale of the house on my behalf. She set them on the kitchen table and she said, quietly, that Craig's company had been going through a rough patch. I had not known that. She said it carefully, not as a request, but as information. She said they had been stretched. She said she didn't want that to affect my care. She said it all in the same voice she had used as a child, when she was trying to explain away something she had broken. I looked at the folder. I told her I would look it over. After she left, I sat down and I read every page. I am a retired school teacher. I know how to read carefully. What I found in that folder was not just a retirement community application. There was a form buried near the back, a real estate authorization, that if signed, would allow Renee to list and sell my property on my behalf, directing the proceeds to an account I did not recognize. I read it 3 times to make sure I understood what I was looking at. Then I put the folder in the drawer under my winter sweaters, and I called Patricia Walsh. Patricia confirmed what I suspected. The authorization form, combined with the power of attorney already in place, would have given Renee complete control over the sale of my home and its proceeds. Patricia asked me what I wanted to do. I told her I was not sure yet, but I was not going to sign anything, and I needed to understand all of my options. Over the next 2 weeks, Patricia helped me do several things quietly. We updated my will. We revoked the existing power of attorney and replaced it with a limited one that covered only medical decisions. We created a revocable living trust and transferred the property into it, with specific terms about how and by whom it could be sold. None of this was visible to Renee. None of it required her involvement. It was all legal, all proper, and all mine to do. I did not confront Renee. I did not mention the folder again. When she called on Sundays, I told her I was still thinking it over. I asked her how Craig was doing. I asked about their dog. I listened to her talk about her week, and I said the right things at the right times. She drove up again in May with Craig, and this time he brought a man he introduced as a real estate associate. The associate walked through my house and made notes on a clipboard. He said nothing directly to me about price, but I saw him write a number on the top of his paper and show it to Craig, and Craig nodded with the kind of satisfaction that made my stomach turn. Before they left, Renee set the folder back on the table. She said she knew I had been going over it. She said she thought I should go ahead and sign this week, because the waiting list at the community had movement, and if I delayed much longer, I would lose my spot. I looked at her. I looked at Craig. Craig was looking out the back window at the garden. I picked up a pen. I signed my name on the application pages for the retirement community. And then I closed the folder and set the pen down and said I needed a little more time with the rest of it. Renee's face did something complicated. She started to say something about the timeline. I said gently that I would have everything sorted before the end of the month. I asked if anyone wanted coffee. She did not push further that day. What she did not know was that when she called me the following Tuesday, I had already met with Patricia twice more. I had a document I was waiting to use. I had also spoken, at Patricia's suggestion, to an investigator friend of hers, a retired police officer named Jean, who had helped me understand what I was looking at from a legal standpoint. What Renee and Craig had been attempting, the combination of pressuring me to sign documents under false urgency, using the power of attorney as a mechanism to redirect my assets, potentially constituting elder financial exploitation, which in North Carolina is a felony. I asked Patricia whether I should go to the police. She said that was my choice. She asked me what outcome I wanted. I thought about it for a long time. I thought about the rose bushes. I thought about Gerald's chair. I thought about Renee sitting with me in the hospital during the long nights when we thought Gerald was not going to make it through the week. I thought about who she had been and who she apparently was now, and whether those two people could be the same person, and how that was possible. I told Patricia I wanted my home protected, and I wanted it on record, and after that, I would deal with the rest. Patricia filed a complaint with the North Carolina Department of Justice's Elder Abuse Unit. I want to say that plainly, because I know some people will wonder why I went that far. I went that far because Renee did not make one attempt to ask me what I wanted. She did not sit down with me and say, "Mom, Craig and I are struggling, could you help us?" She planned it. She prepared documents. She brought a real estate associate to walk through my home before I had agreed to anything. She treated my house like a transaction while I was standing right there. And she used my love for her, my trust in her, as the mechanism to do it. At the end of May, Renee called and said the retirement community needed a decision by Friday. She said she needed me to have the full folder signed before then. She said Craig could drive up Thursday evening and pick it up. She said she would come too. She made it sound like a routine errand. I told her Thursday worked fine. They arrived Thursday evening. Renee set the folder on the kitchen table again. She clicked a pen and held it out to me. I sat down across from her. I did not take the pen. I said, "I want you to know that I have spoken with an attorney." Renee's expression shifted. Craig went very still. I said, "The property was placed in trust 6 weeks ago. The power of attorney was revoked. There is nothing here for you to sign on my behalf, and there is nothing in this folder that would be legally effective at this point. I also want you to know that a complaint has been filed." Renee said my name. Just once. I told her I loved her. I told her that was still true. I told her that loving someone did not mean allowing them to take things from you, and that I had spent 68 years learning the difference. Craig stood up and put on his jacket. He did not speak to me at all. The Department of Justice investigation took 4 months. During that time, I did not speak to Renee. I watered my garden. I went to book club. I had dinner with Pauline on Friday nights. Patricia called me every 2 weeks with updates, and Jean called occasionally just to check in, which I appreciated more than I expected. The investigation found sufficient evidence to refer the matter for prosecution. The documents Renee and Craig had prepared, the account to which my sale proceeds would have been redirected, which belonged to a shell company Craig had set up, the real estate associate who confirmed he had been told the property owner had already agreed to sell, it added up. Craig was charged with financial exploitation of an elderly person and conspiracy. Renee was charged as an accessory. Craig pled guilty to a reduced charge and was sentenced to 2 years of supervised probation, a substantial fine, and mandatory restitution. Renee pled guilty and received probation and community service. She also lost her position at the financial advisory firm where she worked, which I imagine was its own kind of consequence. I did not go to the sentencing hearing. Patricia offered to accompany me, but I said no. I was home that day, and I planted a new rosebush in the back garden. Gerald had always wanted a yellow one. I had never gotten around to it. I planted it that afternoon, and I sat outside until the sun went down, and I did not cry. I had done my crying in private, in the months before, in the times when I let myself think about what might have happened if Pauline had not said those words. If I had just signed. There is something I want to say to anyone listening who is in the position I was in. You are not naive for trusting your children. You are not foolish for not expecting this. What was done to me was deliberate and calculated, and the fact that it almost worked says nothing about my intelligence and everything about their intent. But I also want to say this. It is never too late to protect yourself. I was 68 years old, sitting in an attorney's office for the first time in years, and I walked out of that office with a plan. The paperwork is not complicated. The first call is the hardest part. My house is still on Clover Ridge Lane. The yellow rosebush bloomed for the first time this spring, full and bright and exactly right. I have dinner with Pauline on Fridays. I go to book club. I drive myself to appointments. I have not spoken to Renee since the night she sat across my kitchen table and held out a pen. I do not know what I will do about that yet. I think about her sometimes, the way she was as a girl, the way she looked, holding Gerald's hand at the hospital. I do not understand how someone becomes the person she became. Maybe I never will. But I know who I am, and I know what I built, and I know that it is still mine. That is enough. For now, that is enough. If you are watching this and you have a parent, a grandparent, a neighbor who is older and living alone, please watch carefully. Not with suspicion, with attention. There is a difference. And if you are watching this, and you are the one living alone, please know that protecting yourself is not a betrayal of the people who love you. It is just the truth about who has the right to make decisions about your own life. The answer to that is you. It has always been you. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped even one person make one phone call they had been putting off, then it was worth telling. I'll see you next time.